Hi, everyone. We're going to be doing a slow flow practice today, and we are going to start our practice seated. So if you can, if you've got it available, you might hang out on blocks or a meditation pillow or a blanket if seated is a little bit tricky. And as you know, you're always welcome not to be seated. You could be reclining, resting on your side, maybe even resting on your belly. So finding your way into a comfortable seat, or perhaps resting on the floor. And as you get ready to settle in, just taking a few of those deep breaths, a deeper inhale and that longer exhale. We might even imagine that exhale is actually settling into the weight of your body where you're connected to the floor. That settling in, that exhaling into where you are connected is how we begin to ground and really sort of get out of the ether, maybe get out of our heads and start to get into the physical body and noticing that physical body. And so once those settling breaths feel complete, just inviting the body to breathe itself. There's no effort to breath. We're going to take a few minutes to do a little bit more grounding, a little bit of centering before we begin our practice. So with that in mind, just pausing here for a moment and allowing yourself to witness what might be happening in the physical body. So maybe we have sensation that's gaining our attention. Sometimes there's sensation that's very evident. Maybe it's a little more subtle. And perhaps there isn't a lot that is arising. And if that's the case, I always recommend starting to name parts of the body, beginning at the feet and running your attention up through the top of the head and naming those parts and just noticing if anything arises or if anything is present in that physical body. So taking just about a minute and a half here to notice physical sensation as it arises, or to bring your awareness up through the body and checking in at spaces. This noticing of the physical body or sensations in that physical body with curiosity. That witnessing of what is, and in this moment, accepting what is. And maybe it'll change throughout our practice. Perhaps it remains the same. We're going to begin to draw our awareness to our breath, and very specifically, and you might even place a hand on the belly. We're thinking about breath traveling into that belly area, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it does. So don't worry about physically if you're sensing that breath in the area. But as you begin to inhale, if we can think about that belly inflating, as we exhale, we feel that belly contracting just a little bit, very naturally, nothing that we're creating here. We're just noticing breath, perhaps imagining breath traveling into the belly on the inhale, and that belly deflating a little bit on the exhale. Let's do that for about 4 more breaths, that centering breath at our literal center. We'll take one more deep inhale. If your eyes happen to be closed, on your exhale, out the mouth, just blinking those eyes open. We're all going to meet in tabletop. So if you are resting on your back, take your time, or maybe even roll over to your side to come up into tabletop. In the meantime, while you're thinking about where you want to go, know that if this is a little tricky for wrists, you can always go up on fists, and you can certainly come down to elbows. If it's tough on knees, feel free to place a blanket or a towel right underneath the knees. We're going to start with our cat-cow, and if you have those palms on, we're going to spread our fingers just to distribute some of that weight through those hands and out of the wrists. We're going to start to press into the mat. Press maybe even into the tops of the feet as you round your back, looking down through those knees. And when you inhale next, we'll drop the belly. We'll look up towards the top of the mat. We let those tail feathers shine. So we're exhaling, pressing mat away. We want to feel those shoulder blades spread from the center of the spine out through the side body. And then dropping belly, tail feathers shine. Maybe gaze comes up, or it can always stay very neutral. We're going to press, exhaling. Now, if I'm going too fast or too slow, do your own rhythm here and your own movement. Apologies, still a little bit stuffy here, so you may hear me sniff or cough. We'll continue here with our cat-cow. This moving through, getting a little rhythm to the spine, a little stretch of front and backside body. And then as you finish off that last cat-cow, we're going to come into this very neutral space of the spine, and we're going to tuck our toes and send some weight back towards those toes. Now, if toe joints bug you here, don't tuck toes. We're going to press through the palms or the fists or the elbows to put a little bit of weight. Maybe we're getting a stretch to the arch of the foot. And again, if that is really troublesome for toe joints, just be here getting a little more stretch for the arms, almost like we're doing a child's pose. We're getting a little bit of energy fired up in those fingers and toes. In Chinese medicine, the beginning of some of our energy meridians. And as you feel ready, we're going to come on back to our tabletop. Let's take your right leg. You're going to kick it straight out from your hips. So we're going to open up those hips a little bit before we get into our standing poses. You might stay put here. And just a note, if it feels very intense behind the knee, soften that knee a little bit so it's a little bit more bent. If you want to extend that stretch a little bit through that inner thigh, you can always come down to elbows, let your head hang to look back at that back knee. So we're just judging for ourselves where we can tolerate sensation, maybe encourage sensation. Nothing should be painful. So if it is painful, soften knee, make sure you're up on palms or even blocks underneath those palms. We'll rise up. We're going to take that same leg, right leg kicks all the way behind you, crossing the midline. And then we're going to look over our left shoulder to see if we can see those toes. So the side body opening here, a little bit like we feel in our triangle when we're standing up. 2 more breaths here, also creating some space for breath, perhaps. Opening up some of that rib cage space so the breath can travel deeper into those lungs. Come on back through center, knees come on back. And this time we're going to press back in a full child's pose. Now, I'm not going to rest my head. I'm going to keep my head elevated here for microphone reasons. But if you're able, your resting head, you might even stack fists. Or if you can't reach the floor with the head, you might even have a block or a pillow available. This rounding of the back, the release of this upper body, the restorative space, maybe gaining a bit of energy here. When you inhale next, we rise back up to tabletop. We're going to switch sides. So that left leg kicks out, knee could stay bent. It can be a straight leg. You might be on palms, you might be down on elbows. Don't worry if your sides don't match. And in fact, we're noticing sensation here to see if we need to adjust for sides. And for instance, my side doesn't match. I've got a wall in the way, so I have my knee bent instead of a straight leg. Finding your breath here and doing our best to breathe fully. We tend to sometimes in these deeper stretches try to hold our breath. If you are on elbows, rise up to palms, kick that same leg behind you and across the body. Over to the right side, we're going to gaze at those toes over our right shoulder, opening now that left side body. A little bit of opening for both inner and outer thigh and rib cage space. Might even sometimes feel this in that hip structure, in the gluteus medius or gluteus minimus, or both. Let's come on back through center. Let's press back one more time in our child's pose, really just to get off of those wrists. You might even lift the wrists and circle them around. If you are resting the head, you might roll across that head, that forehead, and give your head almost as if you're shaking your head no at the mat. We know we can modify our child's pose by being on elbows or rounding back up towards the ceiling. So that is also a possibility. We'll do one more breath here before we rise up. On your next inhale, rising up tabletop, we're going to tuck our toes and go into our first down dog. And I'll have some modifications if this particular idea of down dog, where we've got heels reaching, tailbone towards the ceiling, palms pressing in, doesn't suit you. You can always be down on knees and walk your hands closer to the top of your mat, more like quarter dog. You could also be back in your child's pose, resting hips towards heels as you find what works best for you today. We'll do one more full inhale and exhale here, and then we're all going to meet at the front of our mat. So you'll just step those feet forward and slowly begin to roll up. Now I'm going to turn and face you just so you can see me. Stay at the top of your mat. We're going to do a little bit for our shoulders here. So first, finding our mountain pose feet, maybe 4 fingers between. That's a little more solid foundation, a little more challenging to have the feet a little bit closer as I wobble there. So finding inner edges parallel, a little distance, a lot of distance, that's up to you. We're going to take one shoulder at a time, and it doesn't matter which shoulder you start with. We're going to start to circle it in the same direction. So I'm going backwards, but maybe you started forwards. That's okay. We're going to hit both. Let's do a couple more. Sometimes these will stretch a little bit further when we do one at a time. And we're just going to reverse that little circle now. Individual shoulder rolls. If shoulder rolls are tricky, you do a shoulder shrug where you're drawing both shoulders into your ears and then letting those shoulders melt away from those ears. Let's pause here, finding a little bit of micro softening of the knees. We're making sure we aren't locking out those knees. Check in. Are you over gripping here with thighs? Are they feeling really tight? They got to support you, but we want to try not to hold on to tension. Are you over gripping with our buns? And can you let those go? Is there a slight tilt to your pelvis? So it's almost like you're tucking your tailbone. Think about those arms being really heavy and maybe palms face the thighs. Perhaps they face forward. Our head is gently resting on top of that entire structure. And just take a few moments here to breathe. Noticing the soles of the feet. Noticing if you're hanging out on the inside, outside, front side or back side. You might even rock forward and back, inside and out for a few. Just to notice if you can find that central space of the arch of the feet. And drawing really that energy, if we want to get a little bit woo-woo, up through the soles of the feet, through the legs, the torso, fingers, arms, all the way out through the top of the head. We're going to begin with our sun salutation. You're going to stay put. I'm going to step to the top of my mat. Let's bring our hands to heart. Arms can reach up or out. So depending on shoulders, if shoulders are tricky today, you might reach out in a T. We're going to inhale, reach arms to the spot that makes sense for you. We'll exhale to round forward. We'll inhale into our halfway lift. So pressing into what you can reach, floor, shins, or thighs.
When you exhale next, release into that forward fold. Arms reach wide. They might reach up towards the ceiling. And we'll exhale, we'll bring our hands back to heart. Let's do that 3 more times. Inhale, fingertips reach either up or out into a T. Exhale, rounding forward. I'm going to keep my knees soft. You might be able to stretch yours and lengthen. We're going to inhale. Find your halfway lift. Long line from tailbone to top of head. Exhale, release to look through those legs. Arms reach wide as we rise back up. Maybe our gaze goes towards the ceiling. Exhale, hands come to heart 2 more times. Inhale, fingertips reach. Exhale, soft bent knees rounding forward. Find your halfway lift and pressing into what you can here, what you can reach. Release into a forward fold. Arms reach wide. We're going to rise back up. Exhale, hands come back to heart one last time, and we'll add in. We're going to inhale, reach fingertips. Exhale, soft bent knees, round forward. Inhale, find your halfway lift. Exhale, release into a forward fold. We're going to step back very briefly into our plank. So we're going to hold our plank. You could also come down to knees, especially if you shouldn't have that pressure on shoulders or wrists. And just holding here as we press that mat away, feeling our core build a little bit of heat here. And then everybody comes down to knees. We're going to press back with those toes tucked into a little bit of our quarter dog. So a few breaths here. And again, if toes don't like this, point your toes. Now, in this particular space, your head is probably not touching. You might give your head a little shake. No, it might be touching, but if it's not, that's all right too. We're going to rise up tabletop. We're going to slide our right foot between the hands or on the outside of the hands. And from here, we're just going to rock forward and back. So I'm keeping my knee down. I've got my toes tucked in the back. You might have them pointed. We're finding a little bit of stretch through the front of the left thigh and the back of the right thigh. So hamstring and quads here. When you're ready, we're going to land in that front knee, front bent knee, and go ahead, stair step, hands up to your thigh. And if it feels like balance is tricky, you can always walk your foot out to the outside long edge of your mat. We think of that mat as a plank. Try not to be balancing on a beam. We're going to reach your left arm up, or cactus arm. Cactus arm is that 90-degree elbow. And when you're ready, reach over the body over to that right side and then come back through center. 3 more times. We'll exhale to reach over to the right. Inhale back through center. Exhale, reach. Stretching that side body. Inhale back through center 1 more time. Exhale, reach. Inhale, come back up through center. Let that hand come down to the floor. Go ahead. Plant the other hand. We're going to kick back into our plank position or our knee plank again. Holding here. You can move around. I like to pedal this one just to get a little extra stretch through my calves. If you're on your knees, you might lift your legs and pedal those feet, or lift your feet and pedal the feet. 1 more full deep inhale and exhale. If you're in plank, come on down to knees, swing that left foot forward. We're going to go ahead and rock forward and back. So this may be a place where it's hard to reach the floor. And if that's the case, you can always be on your forearms, resting on that knee. Or if you have blocks handy, of course, you can always have blocks underneath the hand. We'll do 1 more time each way. Once we land in that front knee, we bend it, we stair step up, we find our balance first. Maybe we need to walk that foot out a little bit wider. Right arm this time lifts up. As we exhale, we're going to reach over to the left side, right side body stretch. Coming back up. Remember, it could also be in cactus if this bugs your shoulder. So you can reach over and come back through center 2 more times. We're going to exhale to reach. Inhale back through center 1 more time. Exhale, reach. Inhale back through center. Let hands come down. This time, we're going to send knees back. We're going to press back into your version of child's pose. Now, child's pose is tricky. Elbows, knees around the back. I'm resting on a block here, again, for microphone reasons, hopefully not too muffled. You, if you can, are resting head on mat or stacking fists or using a block as well. Breathing into that space of the low back rib cage. When you inhale next, rise up tabletop. Slide your right foot forward. We're going to get ready to tuck the back toe, back left toe, plant that foot at an angle, and then we're going to rise up into our warrior two. So our front knee is bent. We're pressing through that back outer edge of the foot, arms reaching forward and back. Finding a little tailbone tuck here. And we might even imagine that we could draw our feet closer together. So that's going to sort of solidify what's happening through our torso. This lengthening through arms, strong, long arms. And then we're going to have a choice here. Either side angle where your elbow comes down to the thigh, or triangle. If you're doing triangle, we're going to hitch the hip back, front leg straightens. We reach to the front of the mat, and then we cartwheel down. So I'm going to hang out in side angle. And I'm going to make some choices with my arm as well. Shoulder hurts, let it hang out behind the low back, maybe towards the hip. You could also reach it to the back of the room, up towards the ceiling. Now, if you're in triangle, it only goes up towards the ceiling, meaning you've got that straight leg. If you're in side angle like me, it could go overhead. I'm actually going to slide mine behind my back. I'm pushing my elbow into the thigh or the back of my hand into my shin. I'm just careful in triangle not to let my hand rest on top of the leg, either the shin or the thigh. One more breath here. On your inhale, rise back up into your warrior two. We're going to shift our hips. So we're going to swing our arms forward, hips forward, into our warrior one. Arms can reach up towards the ceiling. You can have cactus arms. They can hang out down by your low back. So we want those hips forward, which might mean you're feeling a little bit in that back hip. You're going to see me adjust here to go on the ball of my foot because I'm definitely feeling that in my back hip. Getting my front hip bone squared away to the front of the mat. Long arms, cactus arms, tailbone tuck. So we're careful not to overarch here. That is a pose in yoga. But right now we're working that core, tucking tailbone, and just making sure everything is in alignment here in a way that protects our low back. Let's bring our hands to our heart. This big step is always difficult for balance. So we're going to take a big step forward. Give yourself a little bounce, a little wiggle, maybe a little shake around. We're going to move to the other side. We'll inhale, reach fingertips. Exhale, soft bent knees. We're going to round forward. Inhale, find your halfway lift. Exhale, release. We're going to step back into our plank. And this time we're going to go through our flow. So we're going to lower to the ground. Now you can bring knees down first. Elbows sweep the rib cage. Inhale, either low cobra where you're lifting the heart off, or up dog with shoulders melting away from the ears. We're going to press back into our down dog or your version of down dog. And then the left foot is going to step forward. I'm going to plant my back foot. I cartwheel up into my warrior two. So finding that distance, you see me adjusting mine as well. I never quite know until I get up here how it's going to feel through hips. I'm going to tuck my tailbone, lengthening through arms and feeling that strength through arms. Breathing fully here, we might again have that idea that we could draw our heels closer to each other, which helps really fire up those legs and lengthen the spine. Deciding what you'd like to do on this side, triangle, either straight leg, hitch the hip back and cartwheel down, or side angle, keep the knee bent, elbow comes on. Back hand, all the same choices. Behind the back, maybe to the back of the room. If you're in triangle with that straight leg, could go straight up towards the ceiling. If you're in side angle like me, I might reach overhead. And again, I'm going to keep my hand behind my back, releasing shoulder. We're feeling some core firing, digestive fire, firing up here. We'll give ourselves one more inhale and exhale. And when you inhale next, come back to your warrior two. So we're bending into that front leg, arms reaching forward and back. And then we're going to swing the hip around, swing the arms around, maybe even adjust the foot to come into your warrior one. I'm going to come in to it a little bit more carefully here. Balance is a little challenging for me. You might bend elbows again into cactus, or hands come down to the back, tucking that tailbone, finding that strength, that length through that back hip structure, that right crease of the thigh. We want to lengthen that if possible. We'll bring hands to heart. This is our balance, so be careful here. Bring that back foot all the way, maybe 1 or 2 steps to come right back to the front of your mat. We're going to inhale, reach fingertips. Exhale, soft bent knees, rounding forward. Could be straight legs at this point. Inhale into your halfway lift. Exhale, release into that forward fold and step back into your plank. We're going to pause here, knee plank or full plank, and give ourselves 3 breaths. This is a big strength builder. If it's very intense, you can always come down to knees and, of course, pull some weight off of either the wrists. You could also be on fists. When you exhale next, we're going to lower down to the earth. Inhale, low cobra or up dog. Exhale, press back into your version of down dog for 5 full breaths. Now you can wiggle around here. You could wag the dog. You could do 3-legged dog where you're lifting a leg, letting that hip open up and drawing heel back towards bung. You'll do both sides for a couple of breaths. Or like me, hang out and kind of remain still wherever you're at. Not too much wiggling on my part. When you exhale next, right foot comes forward. Sometimes that means that back knee has to come down. We're going to plant the foot. I'm going to ask you to rise up with hips aiming forward. Hands are going to come down, either to connect and clasp at your tailbone, or they pretend they did. So if arms don't reach, we kind of frame those buns. When you're ready, we're going to straighten that front leg, and we're going to take our torso at a hinge. So I'm going to hang out here first for a second, and I'm going to notice how this feels. Do I want to go lower with my next exhale, or would I like to stay put? I do the same process all the way down to decide if I would like to go lower or stay put. Breathing fully here, big stretch for that front thigh. When you inhale next, bend into the front knee, protect that knee as you rise back up. Now we're going to flip to the back of our mat. So toes turn in the same direction, and then you're going to take that back foot is now your front foot. Now for me, because of hip issues, I'm going to need to square my feet a little bit more before I do this side. So you might have to wiggle that back foot around. Straight leg, hands still clasped at your tailbone. We're going to take first that lean. We're right at an angle, deciding if it's a good idea to go any further. If it is, on the exhale, we lower. And we continue that process until we find the depth that suits us. This is not about how far you get. As you know, I say this all the time. It's not about the destination. It's definitely about the journey. Bend your knee to rise, back up. We're going to make the front of our mat again. So we're just going to turn, and we'll take a step forward, releasing hands. Hands come to heart. We're going to take a nice deep inhale, reach fingertips. Exhale, soft bent knees. We're going to round forward. Inhale, find your halfway lift. Exhale, release into that forward fold. We're going to go through our flow. So we'll step back into our plank or knee plank. On your next exhale, lower down to the ground. Inhale, low cobra. We're all going to hang out in low cobra. Now, if low cobra is tricky, stack your hands, rest your head on your hands. Otherwise, I've got my hands right underneath my underarms. I'm using those palms to press in. I've got my feet connected, and I'm just in this slight back bend, building a little bit of back strength as well as a little bit of energizing. 3 more full breaths here. Now you could add legs lengthening and lifting for the next 2 breaths if you like. When you're ready, we press back into child's pose. We're going to be back in our child's pose for 5 full breaths. And again, maybe elbows and knees. If it's tough on knees, we're on elbows and knees and rounding our back up towards the ceiling. Two more full deep inhales and exhales. And when you're ready, we're going to rise up to tabletop. We're going to go ahead, press back into our down dog. And then we're going to walk our feet towards our hands. We come into a forward fold at the top of our mat. Hang out here for a moment. If it's okay, you might grab hold of the opposite elbow with the palm. Let your head hang. You might give it a shake no or nod yes. And then we're going to let our fingers dangle towards the floor as we use an exhale to slowly round back up. Once we're here, we're going to take hands at our low back. So I'm going to turn away from you. And what can you grab? Can you grab fingers? Can you grab wrists? Can you grab elbows? It all kind of depends on flexibility of the front of the chest as well as length of arms, to be honest. Once you're here, no matter what you've gotten hold of, we're going to squeeze our shoulder blades closer together. So we're careful not to let our hips come forward. We've got maybe more of our mountain pose. So we're stacked right above the arches of our ankles, and we're just squeezing elbows, or you can think about inner edges of your shoulder blades squeezing towards each other. We'll release that. I'm going to turn and face you. You can stay right at the top of your mat. Give your shoulders a little bit of rolling here in one direction and then rolling in the other. We are going to get ready for our tree pose, a little bit of balance. Wider feet, bigger foundation, a little easier to balance. Closer feet, a little harder to balance. We do want our inner edges, however, parallel to each other, no matter how far apart they are. For me, centering hands right at the heart, maybe it feels easier to do a bit of balance with arms out. So choose where you want to go here. Before we move from one side or the other, just noticing the weight in the feet. We'd like it to feel even. We're going to shift our weight to our right leg. The left knee rotates out. Toes might stay on, toes might lift. You might be able to bring the foot to the calf. If you are bringing it to the inner thigh, just be careful here. You always want to skip that knot in the tree as your foot climbs the tree. And it's again about where your hips allow you to go. Now today we're going to hold pretty steady. Sometimes we let our branches grow and sway, and you're welcome to do that. If it makes more sense for you to hang out here with me, I'm going to have my hands in my centering space, and I'm just trying to hold this balance throughout this process here, throughout these few seconds. Noticing if we're really sort of intensely holding on to everything, is there some ease you can find in this balance? The answer might be no, but we're looking for it if possible. If we haven't fallen out yet, we're going to go ahead, bring that foot down, give yourself a little bounce through the knees, maybe a little twist through the torso or a forward fold, releasing some of that balancing tension if it got built up. Decide how far apart you want your feet. Decide where you want your centering hands. And before we move to one side, just pause here to notice the weight in each foot. We'd like it to feel pretty equal. And then we're going to go ahead, shift the weight to the left foot, rotate your right knee out, and decide where you want to go with this side. Toes on, toes lifted, foot on the shin, foot on the thigh. Decide where you'd like your hands to go. Do you want to challenge that balance by changing the arms, by reaching your branches and letting your branches grow? Holding steady here if possible, but know that more than likely, most of us are going to fall out of balance. It's one of the ways we gain balance. Our brain gets a lot of information when we fall out of balance. On your next exhale, we're going to let the foot come to the floor. Give yourself a little bit of bounce, a little bit of release through the shoulders. We are going to transition to reclining on your back. No fancy way to do that. What you might grab though, is if you like to have something underneath your head, a block, a pillow, or a blanket. Sometimes that feels a little bit better as we're lifting the chin a little bit higher than the heart, helps us release those shoulders. So reclining here for a moment, and I'm just going to draw knees into chest. For me, it feels good to rock side to side. Maybe there's some place else that you would rather be here as we're reclining that feels good to you. We're going to open our hips. We're going to do a little bit of release of the back. And then because this is recorded, I'll be getting you into relaxation, but then offering up that last 15 minutes for you to hold relaxation as long as you would like. Let's start with the outsides of those hips. So if you will, we're going to take legs up towards the ceiling. I'm going to cross my right ankle over the top of my left thigh, and I'm going to let that left thigh come in. You can interlace your fingers behind that left thigh. You might play around with the flexing of the foot that's crossed over your right thigh. Sometimes you'll feel the stretch a little bit more intensely, pardon me, if you're flexing the foot. We're noticing head and shoulders, trying our best to relax through that area. Sometimes drawing knees in can really create some tension. I apologize, I'm going to cough here. 2 more full breaths here. We'll send both legs back up towards the ceiling and maybe give them a little wiggle. You could even act like you're swimming. We're going to cross now left ankle over the top of the right. We'll interlace our hands behind the right thigh. And maybe flexing the left foot, that ankle that's crossed over. We might pull those toes back towards the knees. Breathing here and noticing if we could invite the body to release a little more tension, if it's holding on to tension. When you're ready, we're going to send both feet back up towards the ceiling. Legs don't have to go straight here, but if you can, we're working towards pedaling the feet. Now you might feel this in the low back. And if that's the case, you see me rocking side to side. I'm going to slide my hands underneath my bottom or my sacrum, my palms down while I do this. You don't have to, but that is a nice little tuck to help support that low back. A little bit of legs up the wall here, a little bit of an inversion. We're going to bring feet to the floor. We'll extend both legs so they reach and rest on the floor with long legs. Arms either overhead or out into 90-degree elbows or a T position. You're going to see mine in 90-degree today. And just letting heels and hands walk off to that right side. So in our yen class, we do this one for about 5 minutes. Today, maybe a minute at the most. Arms could be overhead. Arms can be in a T. They could be in 90 degrees. Upper body, maybe we're thinking here, arms and head walk off to the right, heels walk off to the right. What stays connected are your buns and shoulder blades. So we want to make sure we're not twisting here. We're opening from the ankle bone to the pinky finger, that whole left side. When you're ready, come on back through center. If arms are overhead, give yourself a moment in center for arms to come down. Maybe it releases some of that compression or blood circulation, depending on how tight those shoulders are. And then either arms reach overhead again, 90-degree elbows or T position, as we start to walk heels off and hands overhead off to the left side this time. Getting that right side body opener. Three more full breaths here. We'll come on back through center. Heels walk through center. Hands come down by your side, palms up or palms down. Just a moment here in the center of your mat to notice each side, left and right sides. We're going to be picking an inner thigh stretch here that suits you. If happy baby is something you like, you can bend knees in. Really, you're kind of using your thighs to frame the rib cage. The feet go up towards the ceiling. We might grab hold of inner or outer edges and draw knees back towards the floor. Maybe that feels a little bit tough today. If you want to do reclining butterfly, soles of feet together, knees drop out. Maybe both of those feel a little bit tough today. And if that's the case, invite yourself to do the opposite. The feet walk wide, the knees drop towards each other. So that's more of our constructive rest pose, which is a pelvis release, just a little less intensity through inner thigh and back of the thigh. Happy baby, reclining butterfly, or like me here, constructive rest pose, letting knees drop towards each other, feet a little bit wider on your mat. You can be mobile here. So especially if you're in happy baby, it might feel nice to kick one leg out and to rock side to side. You can make your butterfly wings fly if you like. We're going to give ourselves 2 more breaths in wherever you've chosen to be. And then we'll all meet with soles of the feet on the floor, fairly close to your bottom. So we're going into our bridge pose. Now this, if you happen to be a practitioner who does shoulder stand or plow, this is also a great place to do shoulder stand or plow. For any of us, me included, working with neck and shoulder stuff, those are not recommended. This one that we'll be doing is okay for the neck because it's a little bit more neutral. So heels fairly close to the bottom, hands comfortable. Sometimes they're down by the side, maybe it's a T position. We're going to lift our hip bones all the way up to the ceiling, but we're noticing weight here. Gaze stays on the ceiling. We would like the weight to be between your shoulder blades. If it's higher in the back of your head, lower your hips and rib cage down. We're a little bit too high and there's a little bit too much pressure in the head and neck. We want to keep that deep pressure right between the shoulder blades. And we're fully breathing here. A few of you may want to link your hands underneath the tailbone and give those shoulder blades a little squeeze. When you're ready, everybody give yourself a big hug. Melt back down. So we're noticing upper body, trying to get that mid back and then that low back to touch. Knees into chest to stretch, or it could be legs straight up towards the ceiling with a little support underneath those buns. If legs are up towards the ceiling, flex your feet. That'll give you that big long stretch from the heel all the way down to your hamstring point of origin, right? And that sits bone. Or feel free to draw knees into chest. You could also have soles of the feet on and rock knees side to side. I suppose that's an option. We're going to do a twist. So soles of the feet come on, lots of versions of our twist. You could do stacked knees, one knee on top of the other, dropping to the right. You could do twisted roots where your left thigh comes on top. You might scoot your hips over to the left and drop the knees to the right. You could also have your right leg long, left knee draws into chest, and then you draw that left knee all the way across the body. Arms are comfortable. I like mine in almost a 90-degree elbow. That gives me a little extra opening through the chest. And I'm going to let my gaze, if my neck allows, I'm going to let my gaze go over my left shoulder. Breathing fully here, and maybe even sort of tracing that breath to see if it can be more expansive, traveling a little bit deeper into those lobes of the lungs near the base of your rib cage. When you're ready, gaze comes back to the ceiling, knees come back to the center. Any movement you might need in between, and your sides don't have to match. So whatever twist you chose on the other side, you don't have to do the same thing. Could be stacked knees, could be right thigh on top for twisted roots, could be right knee in while that left leg extends, drawing that leg across the body. That's the one I'm going to be doing, opening up that right hip for me. Your gaze, again, if your neck allows, can go over the opposite shoulder. So looking over the right shoulder this time. Those deep inhales and exhales, letting the breath expand a little bit deeper, maybe towards that bottom rib cage, maybe towards the belly or side body. I know we're in a twist and sometimes expansion doesn't feel possible in that rib cage. We can imagine it, whether it's happening or not. When you exhale next, drawing knees back to center, gaze back to center. And if this next one feels okay, meaning it doesn't feel constricting to your breath, we're going to do a little bit of constructive rest pose here. So feet wide, knees drop towards each other with ease. So foot width, it totally just depends on your hip structure and what feels comfortable to drop those knees together. Mine go pretty far apart. Yours might be a little bit closer. We're going to wrap our arms around our heart if that doesn't feel constricting to the breath. If it does, just leaving those arms neutral, someplace comfortable, out along the sides or in a T. This may be a place too, we get a little bit of strengthening and traction through the neck vertebrae. If you like, you could nod your chin as if you're nodding it into the notch of your throat, and then press the back of your head into your mat for just about a 3 count. And then release the press. We'll do it 2 more times. Pressing head and releasing 1 more time. Pressing head and then releasing head. 3 more breaths here without any effort, hopefully. We'll release those arms out into a T, and we're going to rock our knees side to side. So a little bit more mobile, rolling across that low back, maybe rolling across the sacrum. We are going to get ready for final relaxation. And since we're on a video here today, I'm going to invite you, as always I do, lovely to be able to maybe relax for 15 minutes but it might just be 5. And I get it. There's a lot going on in our day. I'm going to come to sit up, but I'm going to invite you to find a space that feels like it brings the most ease into the body here at the end of class. And that can be any space. So for some of us, it is Shavasana, where you're resting on your back, your feet are a little bit wider, hands near the hips, about 6 to 8 inches away with palms facing up. But maybe it feels more comfortable to you to rest on your side, to rest on your belly. I have some people who rest in child's pose or legs up the wall. It's really about finding that place that brings ease to the body. If you've cooled down, make sure you have a blankets, socks on, sweatshirts, sweaters, especially if you're planning to stay a bit longer. And it might be helpful to have a few of those settling breaths, just like at the beginning of class, where you're taking a deep inhale. And as you're settling in, we imagine that exhale settling into the weight of the body where you're connected to the floor. And once those settling breaths feel complete, just inviting the body to breathe itself. There's no effort to breath. We invite those longer pauses between thoughts. And sometimes that can lead to a quieting of the chatter of the mind. And we let go of all of the doing of our day, of our practice. And we invite ourselves to just be resting here in a sense of ease, maybe even resting in a sense of well-being. Resting here in ease and well-being for as long as you choose.